Korean cinema showed promising signs of recovery so far this year, with several box office hits attracting audiences back to the theaters. But despite those successes, the industry still faces significant challenges. Today, we'll take a closer look at the survival strategies Korean filmmakers are exploring, from reducing production costs to using AI and rethinking release windows. For that, we're joined by Jae Soh, filmmaker and professor at Seoul Institute of the Arts. Welcome back, Professor Soh.
Hello, nice to be back.
All right, Professor Soh, we keep talking about the great figures at the domestic box office when it comes to movies like Hope recently and also The King's Warden at the beginning of the year, but yet we are still facing challenges, I hear. So could you tell us more about those?
Well, actually this year, just on the face of it, we've gone back to about 94% of pre-pandemic levels of audience participation. As you mentioned, the three films, so it'd be King's Warden, which topped out at around 60 million people, $114 million in revenue, and then we have Colony, which also came out around 42 million, and then 살목지, The Whispering Water, came out at $23 million in the box office. So, you know, these three films have actually taken over the whole thing, and it looks really healthy. But the problem is that, you know, the mid-sized films, like the little films that have, like, you know, not maybe a big star behind it, is still kind of struggling at the box office. So, you know, maybe this year is a good year because we had these big hits, but I don't know if every year we're going to have the same thing. So again, it's going to be, you know, audience participation coming to the theaters, which is slowly growing with social media and everything. But at the same time, I think, you know, the government, we're going to talk about policies and things like that will actually help to have more people come to the theaters, and especially because it's so hot right now. You know, come see a movie and it'll cool you off for sure. Yeah.
Right. And let's talk about solutions. Now, one proposed solution is actually, interestingly, decreasing the stars' or actors' salary, especially with government-funded projects or movies. Now, they're looking to make it only 10% of the movie production for the salaries for the actors. Now, like, do you think reducing stars' or actors' salaries can make a meaningful difference?
Well, right now, the government, you know, with KOFIC, which is the Korean Film Council, they're in talks with companies like BH Entertainment, Management, Scoop. But these are talking about like sort of mid-size, mid-level, like lower budget movies that want to cap it at 10%. But most movies, the star power, what you need to pay is around 18 to 19% of the budget, which is a huge chunk of it. So it'll help to do this. You know, the president of KOFIC, who was a professor at my school at Seoul Institute of the Arts, he also said that the mid-level size film, mid-budgeted size films are sort of the backbone of Korean cinema. So it's a good sign, but at the same time, you know, this private council that they formed with sort of agencies, producers, distributors with the government, they're constantly talking about trying to do this. And it's not necessarily the fact that the stars will actually overcharge the companies to make the movies. They do want to help the film industry. I know a lot of stars will take a pay cut to do that, but at the same time, you know, everybody wants profits, right? So, you know, the actual, you want, like when there's, you know, an OTT series that's going to pay a higher, you know, salary for you, you're definitely going to probably take that as a precedent over small budget films. But I think right now they're in talks. I think it's a healthy sign, and we'll constantly have to kind of tweak with the laws to make this happen. For sure, yeah.
And I guess it's also not legally binding. That's why we will have to see.
Yes, it's voluntary present, but we're going to look at what's going to happen with this situation and try to make it a law as well.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of voluntary, there is also talks about a voluntary agreement regarding the holdback policy, which basically means that it's going to be a rule where you wait a certain period after you release a movie in the theaters before it comes out on OTT streaming platforms. So what's the important focus there?
Well, as you mentioned, basically holdback means the gap between, you know, the final release date of, you know, when the movie is finishing and then basically going to, you know, OTT or Netflix or Disney Plus or, you know, Korean, like, you know, OTTs. But the problem is the theaters are really worried because a lot of times a film might not make its break-even point, you know, which is basically make its money back of what they put in. And the only way they can guarantee that is if they have a kind of a low sort of audience numbers in terms of the theaters, they make it up by basically selling it to, you know, Netflix or any of the OTT platforms. And the problem is like anything else, a lot of the films are finding that it's easier to, if they don't make the money back theatrically, to quickly go into OTT, and that makes the theaters really nervous because it means that, knowing that they'll switch over to a platform, it'll make audiences go, hey, I'll just wait a little bit and pay less to go see the same thing on my OTT platform that I'm used to. So the holdback policy is actually something where we're examining it right now, the government, everybody, but at the same time, everybody has their sort of preferences for it. Theater owners want a longer thing, but at the same time, the people that make the movies, they have to recoup their money back, and in order to do that, they have to sell it to the OTTs as fast as possible. So they're trying to, find out, what's sort of like the medium point for it. And I think, again, these private councils, there's a lot of talks with the Ministry of Culture, and they're trying to find a solution for this.
Yeah, it really isn't like the old days when, I guess, like, we had to wait for it to come out in video, and sometimes that was like 4 or 5 months.
Right.
Like, the younger generation will not know about that.
What is a videotape?
Yeah, we had to wait for the tape, and it took usually, quite a long time. But now we're seeing a lot of Korean films actually, like you said, like come out on streaming platforms or OTT services, like only 2 months. Really, like you said, it's not that long to wait. But it can be debated whether it actually helps or hurts the Korean film industry. What do you think?
Well, I'll take, for example, a movie called Human, which is a really great movie, Ryu Seung-won, starring Jo In-sung, and a lot of stars in it. That movie cost a lot of money. The production budget for it was really high because it was a spy thriller shot, in Russia and Europe and all these things. But it only did about 1.9 million at the box office, so it didn't make the break-even point to make the money back theatrically. So they ended up releasing it on Netflix, and it became like a #1 global hit on Netflix. And the reason for that is because it had just come out. They only spent 2 months in the theater, and they released it. So, that's a case where, theater owners are like, hey, we could have had it maybe in the theaters a little longer, but at the same time, it had a lot of competition at that time. Another movie would be Wild Sings as well, which big hit with all the sort of the promotion with the music videos, things like that. But it didn't make the kind of money it wanted to make in the theater, so it's launching on the sites, and it has a resurrection happening where people are going to see it because of the music, and things like that. So again, it's a weird situation where the production companies that make the films want that option, as you said, like video. In the past, the video rights was actually like a huge way to make money. And now their only option is to sell it to a lot of the OTT platforms. And so the question is, like, what is the holdback period going to be? Is it going to be quick, or do we have to put a law in place that protects the theaters from basically losing all its audiences to OTT platforms as well?
Human is actually the one that I watched on OTT, and the reason was because back then we had The King's Warden also in the theaters, so then you have audiences kind of choose which one to go to watch in the theaters and which ones they're going to watch at home. So I think that is going to be an issue that we're going to discuss for a longer period. But Professor Soh, another emerging strategy is low-budget film production and the use of AI. And recently, the hit drama Kim Bujang, and the English title is Agent Kim Reactivated. This one had a around 3-minute sequence that was made entirely out of AI. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I saw it. It was really interesting. I thought it was really well done, except I think the North Korean, like, I don't give the spoilers ahead, but there's a North Korean kind of character. I think it was completely AI generated, and he looked kind of fake to me. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it's a really effective way if you use it well. And some of the production companies are kind of not using 100% generated. What they'll do is they'll generate it with AI and they'll fix it in post. So that's what they're doing, and a lot of times they'll scan in, like, Seo Ji-sup is the main star of this series. So basically, his face looks real. It doesn't look like it's generated by AI. So they probably had to scan his face, put it in there, things like that. And I heard that some of the action movements that he did was actually him using live action, basing that, and feeding the AI to follow that. So I think those are kind of more healthy aspects of using AI. I think the problem is if you use 100% AI, sometimes it looks really fake. At this point, for all the pros, it's not like YouTube. YouTube is like very low resolution, so you can get away with it. You know, a lot of stuff people are saying is, oh, look at what's happening on YouTube. But, you know, when you want to go up to 4K or a higher resolution, you know, the Odyssey is now shot on IMAX, things like that. You can't, I mean, you can generate it, but it costs a lot of money. But the, you know, Agent Kim, you know, that part of it was that they had used AI in a way to cut the cost, but it was also done in a creative way because they used, I think, hybrid forms where it was actually live action plus AI sort of combined together. And I have to say, the overall result was very nice. And also, it's a sequence that really shows you the background of the character in the thing. So without it, it would have been a lot more shallow, would I say? But it also caught, you know, I think they saved like 60% of the budget or something like that. If they used CG, it would have cost a lot more. So definitely an effective way to use it, but let's kind of use it more creatively than just let a machine do it, you know?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you one day about the fact that actors are giving people licenses to, you know, recreate their face, and that really is an important part of AI. Whether, you know, it's obviously only going to hurt the actor, in my opinion, but we don't have time for that. But more broadly, do you think using AI to improve production efficiency could become like a realistic breakthrough for the Korean film industry, at least?
Not just the Korean film industry, I think all film industries right now. Low budget filmmaking is definitely going to take advantage of this. You know, we recently had a movie called, you know, Run to the West, 중간계, which was 100% AI generated with live action sort of put in. But at the same time, that was a test. And the results were kind of more disappointing, and the movie didn't do that well. But it really showed what was possible, what was not. And I think for low budget filmmaking, I've seen instances where, you know, a lot of my students use AI. You know, they come to me, they show what they would have done if they had to go out. Well, a lot of times, low-budget filmmaking is like, you don't have the money to actually shoot a whole sequence, like maybe a dream or something like that. So you'll use AI to generate those images. And it's not a way like you just let the machines do it. A lot of times, they'll shoot parts of it in live action, and they'll sort of use it to kind of compile it together. So it's called compositing. And AI does it really beautiful. And some of the AI programs aren't like 100%, you know, making it on themselves, but they'll rely on what the humans give you as a source to enhance the material, to make it much more, I would say, fantastic. And it looks good enough, you know, right now. But I think to go 100% on AI is, we still have a long ways to go for that. And I also think, we're talking about visuals, but also a lot of people are using it to write screenplays, which I kind of find it not a good idea right now. It's not nice to create something. It should be like your own IP, but you know, as you know, all of AI uses everything on the internet, which is everybody else's. And the problem is they're not paying for your IP. So that's what I'm worried about.
Well, AI brings a lot of expectations, concerns. There is still so much we can experience with it. So I think we're going to expand on this again in the future, Professor Soh. And for now, thank you very much for your insights and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
And thank you, Walter, as always. Have a great weekend and see you next week.
See you next week.